We're now going to look at pivot tables, and these things are fantastic. These are some of the best features inside Excel. What a pivot table is it's the ability to actually basically turn your data almost into a Rubik's Cube, so you can look at it in different ways from the same source. In order to work with them though, our data does have to be and have some specific characteristics and be in a specific shape. You've heard this kind of stuff before, but it needs a good header row. It needs to have no blank rows or columns anywhere in the data. So the ideal format, honestly, for a tabular data set like this is a table. So I'm going to grab this one and I'm going to flip this directly into a table right off the bat. We'll go and select our table boundaries, we'll say OK, and we'll quickly go and rename our table to something like inventory. Now, to create a pivot table, it's actually very, very easy. What you're going to do is go to the Insert tab, and the biggest button on the very left-hand side is Pivot Table, most important one on the tab. We're going to click to Insert Pivot Table, and it's going to say Select your table or range. It's already picked up the fact that we're in the inventory table. I'm going to go put this on an existing worksheet. Click the little ref edit box here, go to example pivot table, and I'm going to drop this into cell A3. Click the box again and say OK. And this will create us our pivot table ready to be used. So here's how pivot tables work. You can notice that we have in the field list on the right hand side here, we have a whole bunch of field names. These came from the headers of our original table. So we can actually take these now and drag them into different places. So if I wanted to go and say, let me put sold by on rows, you'll see that it immediately creates a unique list of all of the items that were in that table. I could grab my inventory item and slide it in underneath my individual people. I could even take the cost and put it into the values area. If I don't like the way that this is lining up, maybe I say, you know what, I'd rather see my sold by over here on columns. So I'll just drag it up here and let go. And now I can see my sales by salesperson, or rather my costs by salesperson. I don't want costs. I'll just drag this back into the pivot table field list and let it go. And then I can maybe say, maybe price would be a better metric to have on my pivot table. So you can see they allow us an incredible ability to drag and drop different things into different places. If we don't like what we see, we just move it somewhere else. No big deal. And look at the different views of the data that we can get. That's very, very cool. But there are some things that we need to be a little bit careful with pivot tables. One of the things about pivot tables is that they work very, very quickly. Whether you're working with 150 rows, 15 rows, or 150,000 rows, they calculate just about as fast. And the reason being is because the data from our original table, when we actually create this, is streamed into an optimized source called a PivotCache. But the PivotCache has some issues. And let me just show you here. I'm going to set the price of this lovable kitten up. This is a very special kitten. We're going to go up to about 1.5 million. We're going to go back to the example table. And you would think that this should be pretty darn obvious now. Fred's lovable kittens. And look at Fred's lovable kittens. There's still only $225 there. So you go, well, what the heck is going on? Well, here's the challenge. Because the PivotCache streams the data in and is very optimized, Excel doesn't want to be doing that every time the data is changed. So instead, it actually forces us to manually update the PivotCache. And we can do this by right-clicking on our pivot table and saying refresh. And what you'll see is that now that money ends up coming in here. This is a key thing to remember. Pivot tables are fantastic for quickly slicing and dicing and getting alternate views off of your data, but they're not connected live to your data source. So if we go back here and we say, you know, let me just put this back to a price of $45 and say enter, remember when I go to that pivot table, it's not updated. So again, we can right click and say refresh all, or we can actually go to the data tab and click refresh all, and this will refresh every pivot table in the workbook all in one shot. So that makes life a little bit easier to work with there too, because then you only have to worry about doing it once.